Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, you know, those of you that know me will know that it's not often that I find myself gobsmacked, and I normally have something to say about everything. But what the Honourable Madakane just did has truly left me
Honourable members,
speechless.
order.
I find it truly, unbelievably insulting after spending hours and hours and hours in a Rules Committee where I thought, and I'm sure members that sat with me, Honourable Killian, Honourable Naran Singh, that we had a sort of unity inside that committee. After I worked out this morning that just since 2014, we'd spent almost 186 hours together, negotiating, going through best practices, looking at what would strengthen our Parliament. And then to come to this House and to grandstand, and in actual fact, colleagues, if that wasn't the weakest attempt at a re-election speech that I've ever heard, I don't know what is. Honourable Madakane, I'm sure the message has got to Ntuli House and they've been told to re-elect you. Your position is safe, even though it shouldn't be. I must, at this point, make special thanks to members, and it's strange that I'll say this, but I must say thank you to members of the committee, because we worked well together in that time that we sat together. We went through hardships, we went through rough debate, but at the end, we had respect for each other, or so one would have thought. Negotiations were long, they were hard. We sat through recesses, we sat on Fridays, we sat at times that were inconvenient, but we were there and we did a job. I'd like to point out a few things. Never in my life, and certainly as my history as a Member of Parliament, did I ever think that we would be writing rules for a violent Parliament. And I think we can all agree that the violence that has taken over our Parliament not only degrades what we stand for, but certainly the hard-won democracy that we all enjoy today. And that is why Rule 53 was probably one of the most difficult pieces of legislation that we as legislators had to work out, because how do you curtail constitutional rights and still make it a fair and open and democratic Parliament? And I must say that I think that we did well with Rule 53. Rule 53 needed a few amendments, and we did well in the amendments that we came up for. I maintain it is a very sad situation that we have to even contemplate fellow members of Parliament causing harm to one another, but that is the reality in which we live. One thing, though, that we must never forget is that the floor of Parliament is sacrosanct. And that is why we made sure that protection services that come onto the floor of Parliament will not be armed unless actual violence breaks out on the floor. And that ensures that although our rights are limited, we still have the constitutional right that we enjoy as members of Parliament to privilege in this House and to be the voice of the people of South Africa that voted us into office. Some interesting developments have come up in these rules. I think one of the things that I was most pleased with is the fact that finally the Deputy President will have his own day to answer questions. He will have a chance to answer the questions and give due consideration to his answers. And the next cluster will then not have their time curtailed. And I think that's very important when we look at holding the executive to account, that the Deputy President has a specific time for answering questions, and I think we did well there. I think we did well in making EPCs will now be known as mini plenaries. And I think other such debates going forward as mini plenaries are also a good move. I think it is quite disappointing that we didn't get snap debates put in our rules of Parliament, and I'll tell you why. We are a people's Parliament, and we are here to discuss people's issues. And what we see continuously is this over-preparedness and this almost, it's so structured and it's so staged that things don't seem to come up originally in our Parliament. And a snap debate would have allowed for ministers to have the opportunity to show that they understand and they know their portfolios, as well as for members of the House to have an opportunity to really engage with ministers and their deputies and have a fundamental, sometimes disagreement, and sometimes find each other. But this kind of curtailing, I think, it's one of the things, as Honourable Madakane said, this is a living document. And as we go ahead with our document, so things will change and the document will change in time too. We're a developing democracy and we must never forget that. Although after the speech that I've just heard, I do wonder sometimes if we are developing at all, because that was nothing more than a militant insult on everyone that participated in this process. I think it's safe to say that no one wants a military operation on the campus of Parliament. But what happened last week, I think, shocked not only us sitting here in Parliament, but shocked the country as a whole. And with every right to. We saw gross acts of violence. We saw grievous bodily harm and harm to property. That should never be allowed. And I think that in this, Parliament has been remiss in making sure that we have adequate controls so that people coming into Parliament are unarmed, may not harm anyone that's in Parliament. And also our protection services themselves were infiltrated, as we saw, because once again, Honourable Steenhuisen had requested over and over ad nauseum that our protection services were adequately marked and identifiable. They weren't, and we saw what happened. And this is the fundamental problem I have, and I've mentioned this throughout the rules process. This Parliament waits until the proverbial has hit the fan, and then we take action. It took people getting hurt, it took property being destroyed for us to finally say, oh wait, maybe someone actually had a point. And that is something that I hope as we go forward and as we look not only at the National Assembly rules but at the joint rules, we look at ways that we can curb this kind of thing and fill in our weaknesses, because this document is 21 years old and let's hope that we don't have to wait another 21 years for changes. Chairperson, in conclusion, I must say I was going to thank everyone concerned and say what a good time I had on it. I have an incredibly sour taste left in my mouth now, which I didn't think would happen. I do maintain that it is our united job to restore the dignity of Parliament, and me and my party will certainly do our bit. We must be profoundly proud of our Parliament, and we must jealously protect our Constitution at all cost. May we as Parliament be reminded that we are the servants of the people, and in all our duties executed, may we make sure that we benefit only South Africa. Thank you.